All right. Thanks again. Thanks for your patience, everybody. So as I started to say earlier, my name is Jeff Blankenburg. I work at Amazon. I am on the Alexa team, and my job is kind of to be the primary developer. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how we build for voice, how we spend our time thinking about constructing conversations in a digital way. And then I go give talks like this, but I also spend a lot of time talking with folks like you that are thinking about this in a deep way and taking that feedback and ideas back to our product team. So it's kind of a very circular fashion in which I do this. I spend a lot of time building and talking and then gathering a lot of feedback and bringing it back. And what I want to talk today about is specifically how we think about voice and how we think about building applications that talk to our users. It's surprisingly different. My history is as a web developer, mobile developer. That's where I spent most of my career. And voice has always been something that's been interesting to me, but it was never terribly easy to do. And so over the past 5 years or so, with the advent of Alexa and Google Home and Siri and everything else, it's become a lot more accessible. And now it's surprisingly easy to put things together. And so the talk that I want to give today, the talk that I'm here to share with all of you, is about the things that you should be thinking about every time you build anything for voice. So this may mean that you're just building some voice commands into maybe some hardware that you're building, or maybe it's a mobile app that has some voice commands. Or maybe you're building something that's full voice experience like Alexa. So with that, we'll get right into this. I have almost 100 slides, but we'll have no problem getting through that in the next 45 minutes, I promise. All right, so let's get right into this. My first tip always, and this applies to most applications, is to do one thing really well. I think a lot of people get away from this, especially when they think about voice, because voice isn't often the primary driver for why people are writing software. They're doing it because it benefits their customers that already exist on other platforms in other places. Maybe they have a mobile app and they want to give people a way to talk. Maybe they have a website. A good example is a pizza chain that has a website and a mobile app, and you can do all of that stuff today. And they want to give people the ability in their homes to order a pizza with just their voice rather than pulling their phone out or going to their laptop. So the thing that I see very commonly is that many people will say, well, we need the voice app to do all the things that our mobile app does, or all the things that our website does. And I think that's a mistake sometimes, because voice is different. We don't have the ability to do things like navigation, where I can see the buttons that I want to click on and click on different things. I'm limited only by what I can imagine and say to the device. And so I always recommend, as much as you possibly can, think about doing just one thing really well, and then you could continue to tack things on. Let me give you an example of that. I have a skill. So I'm a big baseball fan here in the United States. We like some baseball. And my team, the Cleveland Indians, is something that I'm passionate about. I want to know how they're doing each and every day that they have a game. And so most days I'll sit down at my computer, and before I get started, I will bring up a chart that looks something like this on my computer. This shows me the standings, the table, right, that you guys might look for soccer or cricket or something like that. But this is the standings of all the teams. And I can see exactly where they stand. In this specific example, they're in first place in the Central Division. They have 52 wins, 43 losses, their win percentage. There's all sorts of data here. Communicating this table with voice would be impossibly hard, and it would take forever to hear all of it. What I really care about, though, more than anything, is this column exclusively. I want to know how many more games do they need in order to be in first place if they're not already in first place. All the rest of it is relevant data, but it's all relative. If they have 52 wins, that's great. They have 52 wins, but that doesn't tell me, are they in first place? Are they in second place? Are they way back? Are they way ahead? Because I need to know the standings of everybody else. And so this games back statistic actually tells me exactly how far away they are from the other teams around them, so that I know how close to first place they are, or if they need to win this weekend or things like that. So games back kind of became something I really cared about. And so I built a skill that specifically lets me know how this works. Let me give you a quick example. Alexa, open games back. Alexa, open games back.
I've added the entire MLB standings to your screen. What team do you want to know about? Which?
The Cleveland Indians.
The Cleveland Indians are one game back in the American League Central. They are in second place, with a record of 35-25. Can I tell you about another team?
The New York Yankees.
The New York Yankees are 7 games back in the American League East. They are in second place, with a record of 33 and 27. Can I tell you about another team?
Stop.
Goodbye.
All right, so that's a quick example of something that just does the one thing, right? There's nothing more to that experience other than to say, tell me about my team. And I can pick any of the teams, right? You could do little things like remembering what their team is, so when they open it, it just tells them the team they care about. But I'm not trying to also give them wins and losses and records and what their home streak is or any of that kind of stuff. We can find that other places. We can dig in if we really want to. But at its core, my application does the one thing that I really care about. So that's the first point that I really want to illustrate. The second point that I want to focus on is naming. You notice that I called that skill Games Back. So when I want to know what's going on, I say, hey, open Games Back, and it does it for me. Making your name memorable is really, really important in voice. If you think about all of the apps that you have on your phone and even on your computer, each of them have a very distinct icon. They have a very distinct name, and it's very easy for you to find them. You can even organize them in many ways, but you get a list every time you pull out those devices that shows you exactly what's possible on your individual machine. However, let's use Twitter as an example. If you had the Twitter app on your phone, and I went in and I changed the icon and I changed the name of the app, you would have no idea where Twitter was on your phone anymore. All of a sudden, it's gone. And the problem we have with voice is that we first don't get that screen. We don't have a list of all the apps that are available to us on our device. But two, we can only rely on our memory. So as a user, it's really, really hard if somebody names their skill something crazy. Here, I'll give you a good example. Let's say that I have a game that has all sorts of crazy excitement and trivia games and stuff like that, and I call it Jeff's Super Happy Fun Time. That sounds like a really fun, cool name, but it's not memorable. Because if you say Super Happy Fun Time, great, maybe you'll get it right. But if you switch up any of those words in the wrong order, you're no longer talking to my thing. And in fact, it might even just say like, hey, I don't know what you're asking about. And then you start to doubt yourself and I can't remember what the name is. And oh, well, I guess I just won't use it. So it's really, really important that your users can remember the name of your skill. And we'll get more into that here in a little bit. But I wanted to use one example is a really popular skill. This is a lot like if you remember the old text-based game Zork, that you could just like kind of wander through the woods and look north and look south. It's a lot like that, but it's done as a vocal adventure game with sound effects and all sorts of cool stuff. And they called it the Magic Door. Now, the reason I like this is because when you play it, you say, open the magic door. What a brilliant way to think about like a door and using the word open and all that kind of stuff. So let me give you a quick sound of what this looks like. Alexa, open the magic door.
Welcome back to the winter adventure. As we follow the trail, we walk through the trees, and a crow calls out. I wonder if he's hoping for a snack. We keep going. Is it just me, or does it seem to be getting darker and even colder?
Alexa, stop.
Okay, goodbye. To find out more about our stories, visit us at themagicdoor.org.
All right, so that's a quick example, but you can see that it's a really rich kind of story. They're trying to paint a picture as we go through this, but it's easy to remember because I just have to open the magic door. That's how I get to the world that this thing is created. So there's lots of words, though. It's not just open. Other words you can use are things like ask, begin, launch. You can see them all highlighted here in orange. And I made up some names of some skills, but you can see how those orange words are almost completely interchangeable as far as users are concerned. So when you teach them to talk about your skill, if you run an ad campaign, or even when you're in the game, you can remind them, hey, by the way, don't forget, when you want to do this, you can just say load the dishwasher diaries. And those kinds of little nuanced phrases make it much easier for them to remember what your thing is called. So this is just some simple examples, but using those words and thinking about how those play in makes it much easier for your user to remember how to do this. But let me tell you another story. I am building we'll call it a trivia game, but it's a game in which I give you 3 clues, and you have to figure out what those 3 clues have in common. You may have played board games like this or stuff before. I'll give you a quick example just so you can have this rattling around in your head. These 3 things have something in common, and it's your job to figure out what those things are. So they are fruit, ears, socks. Those three things have something in common, and it'll be interesting for you to think about. I'll give you the answer in a little bit. But as I was thinking about this game, that's how it would work. I would present you with three clues, and then you would have to figure out what they are and give the answer. And I was trying to come up with a clever name for my skill that would be memorable and that would be useful. And the first thing that came to my mind because of the three clues was the Triforce from Zelda. I thought, man, like Triforce is kind of cool. I wonder if there's something I could play with there. But obviously, my lawyers aren't as good as Nintendo's lawyers, so I probably can't use Triforce as is. And then I thought, wait a second. Trivia has the prefix tri in it. That's actually kind of cool, but trivia is a little too generic. I think I probably wouldn't be able to use something like that. What if I flipped it around? What if I did something like via tri, right? Where this is actually like by way of three. That's kind of actually really clever and useful. It kind of illustrates exactly what my game is. The problem with this is that no one ever is going to remember this name. They're not going to remember to be like, yeah, let's play via tri. It's just not something that's going to stick because they have to pull it out of their brain. They have to be able to remember what my thing is called in order to play it. And so I really struggled with this because I wanted something cool and unique and fun. But the name that I ended up landing on for this game is, in fact, Three Clues. This makes a whole lot more sense to name my skill Three Clues because that's the thing that I say 100 times inside the game. It's the thing I remind you about. It's memorable in that I want to play that Three Clues game. Okay, play Three Clues and let's see what happens. And that's the kind of experience that you want for your users. It's something that's so clear and obvious. So let me show you what this game sounds like. Alexa, open Three Clues.
Welcome to Three Clues. In this game, I will give you three clues, and you need to figure out what those clues have in common. Are you ready for your first three clues?
Yes.
A tourist shop, a golfer, a British breakfast. A tourist shop, a golfer, a British breakfast.
I don't think I know the answer to this one. I wrote all of these.
Sorry, this one was so difficult.
Oh, there we go.
They all have T's.
They all
Would you like
have
to hear
T's.
another three clues?
A British breakfast, a golfer, and a gift shop. T's like t-shirts.
Sheets.
Alexa,
Clothes.
stop. So
Sorry to see you go.
in that case, they all have
next
T's.
time on Three Clues.
But you can see how I said three clues a bunch during that game. But they all have T's. The one I gave you originally, which was fruit and socks and ears, did anybody come up with an answer? I don't think I have the chat open. I can fix that here quickly. No, I haven't. I don't think I've missed any answers. Anyway, the answer to that one is they all have pairs. Fruit has pairs, socks have pairs, ears, for the most part, come in pairs. So that is the answer to that one. Anyway, I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. All right, let's move on to number three, but make sure you think about keeping your name memorable. Number three, focusing on intents and not commands. So this takes a little bit of explanation for those of you that maybe haven't built something for voice before. So when we think about intents, these are the things that our user intends to do with our voice application. So if you were building a pizza app, you would probably have a food ordering intent. You might have a store location intent or a phone number intent. Because if they say, what's the phone number of your store, you want to be able to give that to them. And so we have to recognize what are the kinds of things a user might ask for. I often use a DVD player as an example of intents because they have a very specific set of buttons on the front of a DVD player. And in that case, you would have a play intent, a pause intent, a stop intent, maybe an eject intent if that's something that you would want your voice-enabled application to do. But intents are the things that we really want to focus on. What we don't want to think about are specific commands. I have yet another example of a skill I've built. This one is called Alexa Dev Tips, and the idea behind this is that it can provide information to developers that are thinking about building stuff for Alexa. So some of the commands that I've first thought of that they might ask for are things like this. Ask dev tips about monetization, or tell me about persistence, or say bazinga, right? That's a funny word to get the skill to say. So these are commands, and the reason these are tricky is because it assumes that the user knows what to say. They knew to ask about monetization. They knew to ask about persistence. They knew that it could say funny things. But that's not a safe assumption because they don't know that stuff. The kinds of things they're actually going to say look more like intents, like this. Teach me something new, or play a speech con for me. I know there are these things called speech cons, but I don't know what any of them are. Or what should I learn next, right? We could keep track of the things they've already heard and give them something new that they haven't heard previously. By flipping it a little bit and by thinking about intents, these still map to the first examples. It's just that we're not expecting the user to have any working knowledge about what our data looks like or what our API is or anything like that. Instead, we end up with these intents that are the kinds of things humans would actually say. So let me show you how these work. Alexa, open dev tips.
This is Alexa Dev Tips. What would you like to do next?
Play a random speech con for me.
There is a problem with the requested skills response.
Oh, that's nice. This is a skill I haven't actually tested in a little while, so maybe I broke something. Alexa, open dev tips.
Hello. What should we do now?
Play a speech con.
Here's what I know about speech cons. Bazinga! Speech cons are special words and phrases that Alexa pronounces more expressively. You can include these exclamations in your skills text-to-speech using SSML. You can ask this skill for a random speech con, or ask me to say a specific speech con anytime. What should we do now?
Say bazinga.
Bazinga!
There we go.
What would you like to know?
Alexa, stop.
Shine on, you crazy diamonds.
All right. So that's an example of being able to follow my intents, not specifically I can say bazinga and it works, but the idea is to get her to say things randomly, to be able to respond in a way that is like a conversation, not just us saying, hey, I know which button to push, so I'm going to push the button to get the response I want. Users don't know the buttons to push, and we really need to anticipate that. All right, on to number 4. The next one is simplify choices. This is something that gets lost very quickly, especially when we as developers are also the ones building the entire experience, and we don't have voice designers or a lot of other contributors participating. So the first thing that I like to show is that when we have a conversation, it's a back and forth. You have these thought bubbles as they go back and forth, people are talking, and then suddenly a question is asked. And that question could take any form, right? It might be a yes-no question. It might be some multiple choice. It might be free form, wide open, and looking for you to give a full answer. In any of those cases, though, you have a question to answer. And you need to think about how to handle the answer to that question. So one of the things that we really struggle with in voice communication in applications is the idea of an open-ended question, something like this. Is there something else I can help you with? Do you have another question? Would you like to know something else? In these kinds of scenarios, when we're building for voice, we have to be able to anticipate anything when we ask them an open-ended question like this. The thing that you don't notice initially, though, is that none of these questions are actually open-ended. If you read them again, is there something else I can help you with? Do you have another question? And would you like to know something else? Are technically all yes-no questions. I'm asking the user, do you have another thing? Do you want something? Do you have this? Whatever. Those are the questions I'm actually asking. And by doing that, by just thinking about our phrasing a little bit, we force the user to say yes or no. Now, what happens if they say yes? Now I have to ask them the question again. Okay, what is it that you want to know? So it's very important to think about how you're phrasing your questions to drive the user towards actually answering the question you're asking, which in this case, just by rephrasing my questions a little bit, we now get right to the point. What else would you like to know about? What can I help you with? What topic can I assist you with? In each of those examples, I'm pushing the user to give me a very specific answer about what they want and not setting them up for a yes-no trap. There are plenty of times when yes and no makes a lot of sense, but in this specific scenario, it certainly doesn't. So let's talk a little bit more about giving the users the ability to answer questions properly. And for that, I'm going to do a little experiment. Because I can actually see you guys on camera, this will be more fun. I've given this presentation a couple times virtually, and I can't see anyone, so it's very hard. So we actually get some participation here. I am going to ask you to raise your hands in a little bit. And what I want you to do is just raise your hand when you know the answer to the question that I'm about to ask you. So I'm going to make you make a choice. And when you make your choice, I just want you to raise your hand and you are locked in. So you're going to have to choose one of these things forever. What this means is everything else that appears on the screen, you can never have again. You are locking your choice in for the rest of your life. So this is a big, momentous decision. Are you guys ready? Okay, here we go. You have to pick one. As soon as you know your answer, raise your hand. Adam's still deciding. That's tough. Okay, everybody's got their decision made. But that took us a couple of seconds, right? So you either chose chocolate or you chose vanilla. And if you chose chocolate, you're wrong, but that's fine. It's totally fine. So you saw, though, that it took a second. Like, this is a big decision. I have to make this decision for the rest of my life. I want to take this a step further now. I want to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to give you a new set of things, and I want you to make your choice. Ready? As soon as you know your answer, raise your hand. This is harder, right? I have to not only consume the whole list and really get a good feel for what's on here, but I also have to then eliminate all of them but one for the rest of my life. This becomes infinitely harder because there's so much choice. By the way, did any of you happen to pick swamp? That doesn't feel like a flavor of ice cream I would really care about, but I went and looked it up. It actually looks pretty good. Vanilla ice cream, Oreos, malted milk balls, chocolate chips, M&Ms, and then cut off on the bottom it says, and a caramel swirl. I might actually try that. But let's think about something like fruit. Let's think about how this might work if we're presenting choices to our users. So if we have a fruit stand skill, some kind of voice interface where people can talk or order fruit, we might say something like this. We have apples, bananas, oranges, lemons, grapes, kiwis, blackberries, strawberries, and mangoes. Which fruit do you want? Well, there's a couple of issues with this. The first is I presented you with a long list of things that you have to hold in your head. On top of that, I also didn't tell you I was going to ask you which one you wanted. I gave you a list, and then I said, which one do you want? That feeling to a user is the same as when you're in a conference call with your whole team, and you're only half paying attention because it's boring and it's not important. And then your boss calls on you to say, what did you think about that? And you're like, I don't even know what the question was. Can you repeat it? Right? Like that's happened to all of us at some point. There's a couple of ways we can solve this specific problem because we want them to know what products we have and we want them to be able to ask for them. But what we can do instead is simplify first and then think about the ordering of our phrasing. So first, let's simplify to a shorter list of fruits. So we'll say instead, what fruit do you want? Apples, bananas, or oranges? Now, there's two things that we solved here. The first is we put the question first. What fruit do you want? This now tells the user, I am looking for your input. I am looking for you to give me feedback on what your thing you want is. We could expand this to say apples, bananas, oranges, or something else. And then they have a couple of choices. They could say grapes, because that's something else. Or they could say something else, at which point now I know I should give them the whole list. But they're prepared and ready to listen for that list now. So in either of those cases, it's up to you how you want to handle this. But always, when you give someone a list of choices, always give them the question first, and then give them the list of opportunities, of choices that they can make. Because if you give them the list first, they don't know that they're supposed to be listening for something to choose. Okay, so let's move on to number 5. This is a fun one to do as well. This is using the one breath test. This is really important as we think about how much speech, how much response we want to have to our users. And as you've noticed in this presentation, I like to use a lot of rich imagery, and I really struggled to come up with a good one for the one breath test. This one kind of feels like it to me, right? This guy's standing on the beach. I think it's the beach, maybe, and you can just feel that he's taking a nice big inhale. I thought this was also a good illustration of that because this guy doesn't have any equipment, so everything he's going to do right now is going to be done on one breath. So you get a very good feel for like how long one breath can really be. But as we think about the one breath test, it's really important to think about how we're responding to our user and how many words we're really using. So a good example of this, this is kind of a niche thing, so let me know if you guys don't know, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this character for a minute. Some people don't know who this is. I'm guessing all of you do. And And I wanted to build an experience where it was like an all-knowing kind of data bank for everything Star Wars. And so I wrote some answers. I wrote some content for each of the characters that I could think of. I now have well over 500 entities in this database that are characters and droids and species and planets and vehicles and weapons and all sorts of cool stuff. But I left my Luke Skywalker answer the way it was because I think it's a really good illustration of a bad way to approach this. So let me just show you. Alexa, open unofficial Star Wars databank.
Handing off to Star Wars Databank, unofficial, by Jeff Blankenburg.
Welcome to the Star Wars Databank. I can answer your questions about people and places in the Star Wars universe, and even vehicles, weapons, or droids. What would you like to know about?
Tell me about Luke Skywalker.
You asked me about Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker was a Tatooine farm boy who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the greatest Jedi the galaxy has ever known. Along with his friends Princess Leia and Han Solo, Luke battled the evil Empire, discovered the truth of his parentage, and ended the tyranny of the Sith. A generation later, the location of the famed Jedi Master was one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries. Is there something else you would like to know?
Stop.
Never tell me the odds.
Okay, so that is my voice experience for Luke Skywalker. That's long. I mean, it's good. It's good, useful information. It gives me a little bit of backstory on who he is and whatever. But I think initially it should be a very basic couple of sentences. And then if the user wants more, like we could offer the user to hear like the long story. Here, let me give you the long lineage of everything I know about Luke Skywalker. And it could be paragraphs and paragraphs. But by breaking it down and forcing the user into this, especially if this is the first character they've asked about, this is a lot to hear. And you start to tune out after a little bit, like, okay, I get it. You're talking about all the things that's going on with Luke Skywalker. So let me show you a simpler example. This one's going to make you laugh. But let's ask about Darth Vader for a moment. Alexa, open unofficial Star Wars databank.
Handing off to Star Wars Databank, unofficial, by Jeff Blankenburg.
Hello. I was expecting someone with your reputation to be a little older. What would you like to know?
Tell me about Darth Vader.
You asked me about Darth Vader. Darth Vader is a bad man. Also, spoiler alert. He is Luke Skywalker's father. How else may I be of assistance?
Stop.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Okay, so that's my Darth Vader example, right? It's kind of cheeky and funny, and that like he's just a bad man. I don't think we need to get into much more detail on that, but that gives us a quick illustration. Most people have some idea of who Darth Vader is anyway. But those kinds of things make a big difference in the kind of experience that you have. Now, if people want the deep dive, if they want to know that he was Anakin Skywalker and all these other things, hopefully I didn't spoil the trilogy for you there. I'm hoping you knew that spoiler already. But that's the kind of thing that makes a big difference by just thinking about how many words could I get out if I was saying them. And that Luke Skywalker example, that requires a couple of breaths to really finish. So try to think about when you're writing content for voice, if you can say it in one breath comfortably, then it's the right amount. If you can't, don't. Find other ways to break it up. All right, number six, including a variety of responses. What you don't want in most of your applications is predictability. You want something like playing a game of chess, right? You want to be able to think about a couple of moves ahead. You want to be able to know that your user could do any move at any time. And I think that's a super important point as we go through this. But as software developers, think about all of the messaging that we receive from every major entity. Think about the Google's, this is the iOS human interface guidelines about how things should look and act. If we think about the Google guidelines, they use words like predictable and consistent. These are things that make a ton of sense for us when we're building a visual interface. We want something that's predictable and consistent. We want to know when we see a blue button that means to do a thing. We want to know that when text is of a certain size or a certain way, that means that it's a certain headline or quality of content. But with voice, With voice, we don't have any of that. All we have is conversation. And so we can emphasize words and we can play with things, but there's no reason to be consistent. And in fact, I would argue the consistency actually hurts you in voice. I like to think when we talk about voice that we want to flip everything literally upside down. And it's amazing to me how every time I look at this image, it just makes me uncomfortable. All I did was turn it upside down, but it feels weird even to look at that. There's a little bit of discomfort in just seeing a skyline upside down. So one of the things that I recommend when we think about how do we randomize, how do we customize our speech, the first is to keep it fresh, keep it random. So this means that instead of just writing one sentence that the user hears every time they try to do something, we write 5 or 7 or 12 or 20 different versions of that sentence. They all have the same meaning and the same purpose, but they have different words. And in doing that, you make it so that the user, each time they interact with your application, they don't hear the same thing every time. There's really good reasons for this, but let me give you a quick illustration. Alexa, open TKO Trivia.
Welcome to TKO Trivia, the trivia game show where you answer difficult questions and win nothing. What would you like to do now?
Stop.
Make sure the doormat says goodbye.
All right. So there's a custom intro. She said something about answering difficult questions and winning nothing. And then at the end, she said something about a doormat and goodbye. So I'm going to open the skill again, and I want you to notice that it's different. Alexa, open TKO Trivia.
Whoops. It looks like
Alexa,
one of our programmers.
Stop. I hadn't exited yet. I apologize.
Be good,
Alexa,
or don't get caught.
Quit. Okay. Alexa, open TKO Trivia.
This is TKO Trivia. If you thought Jeopardy was challenging, you're in for a treat. What would you like to do now?
Stop.
Be excellent to each other.
All right. So you can see that I was able to just simply randomize these. Now, the way that I do this, like most applications, there's a database sitting behind it. And so this is a service called Airtable that I'm using in this example. And you can see that I have a bunch of what I call voice responses. These happen to all be my goodbye messages. And there's lots and lots of them. I think I have well over 100 different goodbye messages that she uses. And so sometimes she'll say live long and prosper, which is from Star Trek. Or she might use something like see you later, alligator. Yeah, I'm assuming you guys have heard those terms in the UK and around as well. But I didn't realize that there are many, many more than after a while crocodile and see you later, alligator. There's also gotta go buffalo and out the door dinosaur and all sorts of other phrasing that I had no idea. So I found a list of those and I add them to my database, and then I added a bunch of like famous goodbye quotes from movies. And before I knew it, I had 100 different ways to say goodbye in my app, which is awesome because they get greeted with this kind of fun exit every time they leave. And I do the same thing for all of my speech. So the other thing, in addition to having a variety of responses, is also to vary the order in which you present your statements. So let's think about for a moment building an application that is a travel agent. So the user wants to be able to talk and they want to be able to interact with a travel agent in a voice application. So in order for us to be able to book any kind of travel for you, there's a few things that we need to know, right? We need where you're flying from, where you're flying to, if you have a preferred airline, what day you want to leave and what day you want to return. The good news in this travel agent example is that it actually doesn't matter at all what order I get these in. So I could ask you where you're flying from the first time, but the next time I could say, oh, where do you want to go? And they say, oh, I want to go to Paris. Okay, where are you flying from? Well, I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Okay, cool. Where? What day do you want to go to Paris? Right? We can flip those things around, and instead of this order, it could just as easily be this order. It really doesn't matter. And so my encouragement to you, and I'll get to the big point of this here in a second, is that mixing this stuff up forces the user to listen. And by forcing them to listen, by forcing them to pay attention, because it's not predictable, they don't know what's coming next, they have to listen, they have to engage, and they have to continue to have that conversation. Either that or they walk away because they don't want to do it anymore. But if you want them to be engaged, if you want them to pay attention and not just have it be a predictable experience, mixing up the order and mixing up the statements that you use forces them to listen in a way that, how many times have you been on a phone system where it's like, press 1 to do this, press 2 to do this, and you're not paying attention because you're just waiting to hear the thing you care about. But later, if I asked you, what was choice number 2, you would have no idea because that wasn't one that was important to you. By forcing them to pay attention, by mixing up the order in which you receive commands, it forces you to engage in the conversation much more than you would when you're just listening for the thing you're waiting to hear. So highly recommended. Randomize your speech, randomize the order as much as you can. Okay, number 7, handle the unexpected gracefully. This is one that is also very important. We don't want users to run into errors. We don't want them to have any technical difficulties, but we understand that the user can say anything at any time. And so sometimes we just have to be very specific about what's going on. So we've already heard this once, right? Errors can happen. There was a problem with the requested skills response. This is the default Alexa error when the developer doesn't handle it themselves. But the first step you can take in all of this is to make it a little more fun. Instead of allowing that random error to come through, write your own. It seems our trivia questions are better than our software developers. Something's broken and we've alerted our team. Can I offer you a random trivia question instead? Or is there some part of the application I could have you use that isn't broken right now? That kind of stuff really resonates well with your user and they won't quit. But if they hear there was a problem with the requested skills response, they generally walk away. So I recommend customizing your error messages as much as you can. Try to redirect them towards something that maybe is working right now if you have sections of your app that are faulty or maybe only work at certain times. But let me give you another example. I mentioned earlier that I have a Major League Baseball skill that I care about, the game's back. But what happens if they ask me about the New York Jets, which is actually an American football team? So let's see what happens when I ask for that. Alexa, open Games Back.
Handing off to Games Back by Jeff Blankenburg. I've added the entire MLB standings to your screen. What team do you want to know about?
Tell me about the New York Jets.
Did you want the Yankees or the Mets?
Oh, right, the Mets.
The New York Mets are 9 games back in the National League East. They are in 4th place, with a record of 26-34.
Alexa,
which team would you like to...
Tell me about the New England Patriots.
The New York Mets are 9 games back in the National League East.
Alexa,
They are in...
tell me about the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm sorry, I don't think Kansas City Chiefs is a baseball team. Can I tell you about another team?
Stop.
Goodbye.
Okay, so there were 2 things that we picked up in that one. The first one is when I said New York Jets, it said, oh, did you want the Yankees or the Mets? This is a baseball skill. So those are the only teams we know anything about. So that was the first easy solution. But then I mixed it up a little bit and I asked it about the Kansas City Chiefs. And it said, I'm sorry, but I don't know the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not a baseball team. So is there a different team I can tell you about, right? It takes what could have been an error when we call our API or look something up or whatever. And we're like, I don't have a record for that. What am I supposed to do? Instead, we just redirect them and say, I was expecting you to say the name of a baseball team, and it doesn't sound like the thing you said, which I'm going to say back to you now. It doesn't sound like that's a baseball team. Is there one I can tell you about instead? So that's a really simple way to kind of flip what could be an error or an issue for the user into something positive that redirects them back to the way you want them to use your application. All right. Number 8, these last couple are pretty quick. Make enhancements based on data. There's lots and lots of metadata that you can gather about what's going on inside your app as you go. Here's some simple examples. You can see that I'm seeing, this is from my dev tips skill. So I can see that they look for the answer intent quite often. That's how do I do this? How do I solve this problem? There's also some in there about the display templates. There's some in there about specific, I thought there was one about the cancel intent. The speech con intent is there at the top. All of those are examples of things somebody asked me to do something, and I'm just recording this in my data so that I keep track of what people do and how they use my app. What this allows me to see is looking at my intents, I can say, oh, wow, it actually looks like people use the latest news feature of my skill more than anything else. Then answer intent is really popular, but if I scroll down, I can see that the display template intent, well, we only had 6 users this month. That's not a lot. I was going to add some more display template information to the skill, but I think actually I'm going to focus more of my time on the answer intent stuff, right? It allows me to drive how I'm going to continue to grow and manage my app based on the usage that I'm seeing. This seems super obvious. We do this with most software, but the number of times that people build a voice app and then just let it live is remarkable to me. And there's so much we can do after we get a bunch of users using it to really understand what's important and what's not important to them. So diving into your data, I think, is really important. It's something you should do everywhere, but especially with voice. All right, number 9, and this is a big one as well, is provide contextual help. Again, we don't have menus, we don't have buttons people can push. All they can do is talk. And so if the words they're using aren't getting them what they want, they're going to say help, or I don't know what to do, or something like that. Well, we can catch that. And what I found with help primarily is that most people, instead of providing actual help, they build a response that is like the about page on your website. They'll say something like this. Oh, this skill lets you order from our big menu of pizza, breadsticks, pasta, whatever. What would you like to do? Well, that's not really helpful, because if I said help, I probably already knew you were a restaurant, and I probably already knew that you offered these kinds of foods. So you haven't actually helped me at all. What I should do instead is take the context of what they're doing right now, which might be trying to order a pizza, and give them some clues about how they can use that pizza ordering system the right way. Something like this. It looks like you're trying to order a pizza. You can add or remove toppings by saying things like add pepperoni or remove anchovies. You can also add extras like sauces, extra cheese, or different crusts. Just ask for them. Did you want to get back to your pizza order, or did you need help with something else, right? I'm also giving them that out to say, well, actually, no, I decided it was going to take too long to go through this process, so I just want your phone number. And by saying phone number or whatever, now we can get them into the place that they really want to be. So this is just a way, again, to really give them the opportunity to say, I can, rather than I can't, because it's really, really hard when you're working with voice to know what you can and can't do. And so help is sometimes the way to do that. All right, our last tip, number 10, and this is more important than anything, beta test with real users. Get real humans to really use your software in a meaningful way before you roll it out to the general population. Because you, in your head, have a way that you speak and a way that you talk to things. And you will find very quickly that most people don't talk like you. And they will use words in different orders, in different ways. And if you have beta testers, you'll catch all that stuff really quick. You'll get errors. You'll find people navigating to the wrong place, even though they said the right thing. And you can fix that. You can tweak your machine learning model to say these words should go here and these words should go here. And we have a fantastic beta testing program built right into what goes on inside the Alexa development ecosystem. So it's very, very easy for you to just add somebody's email address, give them access to your skill before it's published, and make it very easy for them to use it. Beta tests run for 90 days, so it's a good amount of time to really get some feel for how this is all going to work before you actually roll it out to the public. You can always end them early, but you can never go longer than 90 days. I recommend, though, always finding a beautiful stock photo family like this one to try your stuff out. Whatever it may be, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your colleagues like I did here. This was where we all met up way before COVID. And we were trying everybody's skills, trying to talk to them, trying to play with them. It was just a really fun experience, but it was cool to see how other people used your software. The last thing I'll leave you with is that you don't even need to build anything to go through a lot of this beta testing. I'd like to use the Wizard of Oz as an example of this. If you remember the Wizard of Oz, and hopefully, again, I'm not spoiling a movie for you, but I think we're probably safe on this one. There was a wizard behind a curtain, and you walked up and you were talking to this all-powerful Wizard of Oz that had this big floating head in a room, but in fact, it was just a man behind a curtain. This is a perfect way, when you first start thinking about voice, as a way to learn what some of these interactions should be. What do people want to do? Stand behind a curtain so that you don't get any visual representation at all about what the user's saying. There's no body language. All you get is their voice. And you say, okay, I'm a bank. Talk to me like I'm a bank. What do you want to do? And you should have somebody writing everything that gets said down. But by being behind that curtain and continuing that conversation, when they say, what's my bank balance? You can say, wait a second, we haven't logged in yet. Please link your account, or whatever. You behave like the device would. This is a fantastic way, before you've ever written any code, to get a really good scope on what's important, what's not important, and what you should focus on. So the other thing that I like about the Wizard of Oz is that as you start to build voice experiences, you're going to ask that question a lot. What is important? What should we be building? And the rule should be, if I can pull my phone out, open your app, and do it right away, I can get that information by just opening your app, or maybe within one click, I can see that on your website. that's probably not the stuff that you want to focus on. For voice, I always recommend, and this is where Wizard of Oz comes in, things that would take people at least 3 clicks to get to, 3 taps. Think about the ruby slippers. If you use that as your frame of reference, things that people have to dig in deep for, that's the stuff that you should make easy to find with voice. An example of this I like is that as part of my compensation at Amazon, I am given shares of stock occasionally. And the application that I have to see how many shares of stock I have requires me to tap 4 different times, including a login every time, in order to just see how many shares I currently own. That's a lot of work. Now, I have stock apps that will show me the price of that stock, but that stock app doesn't keep track of how many shares I have. So then I have to go compare the two and put all that together. So if I was building a voice app for my stock app thing, it would not only keep track of how many shares I have, but it would also know the price, and it would be able to say, hey, you have 4 shares that's worth $12,000. That's amazing. But today, I don't really have that luxury. They haven't built a voice experience for me. So that's something that's really, really important. Think about that 3 clicks, the Ruby slippers, as a way to think about, okay, what would take our users 3 clicks that's really important to them to get? And use that as your foundation for what you're going to build in your future applications. So we talked about a ton of numbers, a ton of good tips here. I want to give you the list in case you want to grab a screenshot. This is the one place. You have all of the ideas in one place, so you can grab that. But I want to make sure you guys walk away with at least those 10 points. And once you've grabbed those screenshots, hopefully you have, I'm going to move on to my last slide, which is me. Thank you guys all so much for having me. Hopefully you learned a little bit, got entertained along the way, and learned a little bit about what goes into building voice. If you want to reach out to me literally anywhere, I am at Jeff Blankenburg on practically every service, and especially on Twitch. I am there every morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, which I think is currently 4 p.m. GMT. So if you guys ever want to tune in at 4 p.m., I'm there almost every day. Not today because I'm here with all of you. But I'm there almost every day building stuff for Alexa. So if you want to come learn about voice with me, feel free to join me on Twitch, drop a follow, whatever. But Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the places, I'm Jeff Blankenburg. So please come find me. And thank you guys all for having me.